What's up, YouTube? If it's your first time here, my name is Jace and I'm a middle school music teacher here in Southwest Florida. In today's video, I'm going to discuss the differences and the similarities between teaching in a public school versus a private school. I'm going to do my very best to keep this video as unbiased and informational as possible. The truth is that there are aspects of each that would frustrate any teacher. But I think that you should decide for yourself whether you think those things are deal breakers or not. You may be wondering, why am I qualified to talk on this topic? So let me give you a brief background and then we'll get into it. In my own educational experience, from 4th to 12th grade, I attended a private school. So that gives me the perspective as a student and what to expect and what that looks like. After graduate school, I moved on and actually taught in a private school setting as a K-12 music teacher. And then finally, I transitioned into the public school setting where I've been teaching ever since. And through these experiences, I feel that I can speak to the aspects of each that affect teaching positions in each setting. So let's get into it. Let's start with school size. Private schools have the luxury of choosing who attends their schools, basically. However, since they don't receive any public funding for the most part, they're more inclined to accept as many students as possible. Private schools will generally have a lower student population than the local public school. This benefits teachers because less students means smaller class sizes. At the most, I had 25 students in a class at a time. And that was generally in my choirs that I taught, which are supposed to be larger than normal anyways. But generally, I had maybe 15 to 20 students in a class at a time. And that was across all grade levels, K through 12. And since the classroom sizes were so small, this made the classroom management and addressing each student's educational needs a lot more manageable during each lesson. Public school. It's common knowledge that students who live in close proximity to a school will generally attend that school. Some states allow for school choice, so that can affect a school's population as well. But for the most part, proximity is really the only admissions criteria for a public school. And this leads to much larger school populations. Now, you'll hear a lot of teachers express frustration with such large class sizes in a public school, and I'm here to tell you that that is very accurate. According to Google, the average class size in an American public school is 20.9 students. This, however, is only the average. As of 2020, there's just over 130,000 public schools in the United States today. So small rural towns may have smaller class sizes because there's less population in those areas, whereas big cities may have bigger class sizes. So it really varies, but in general, you will have a larger class size in a public school. Number 2, school culture. In my experience, school culture determines how administration, teachers, students, and staff all treat each other and how they conduct themselves as they go about their day. Depending on the kind of school it is, the platform for each private school will really vary. It might be a performing arts focused school where students are heavily involved in the arts. It might be a prep school for students looking to play college athletics. And some will have religious affiliations that will help set the policies and educational goals of the school. But some aspects will be the same regardless of what private school you teach at. Every private school is constantly competing with their public school counterparts. More students equals more money for the school. Because of this, appearance is very important. There will often be a dress code or a uniform policy, and as a teacher, that's your job to enforce. Academics are generally regarded as very important. This seems obvious because we are teachers, but students are generally expected to perform at a very high level, and teachers are expected to produce high-performing students. This is an obvious expectation, but it's just another way that the private school can set itself apart from the public school system. And in my experience as a teacher, I was required to have office hours or tutoring hours after school for students to come and get extra help if they needed it. And that may vary from each school, but that was something different that I didn't experience in public school. In a private school, parents will be very involved in what you're doing, and I'll talk about that more later. But be prepared to get to know the parents and the families all together because you will probably teach more than one of their children at any given time. The difference from public school culture and private school culture is that public schools will generally adapt the culture that already surrounds them in the community, while a private school would create a culture all their own to distinguish themselves as a desirable place to attend school. A community's culture will generally affect the students' motivations and behavior while they're at school. One possible negative aspect of teaching in public school is if you're in a town where academics aren't really regarded as important, then you may have less parent involvement. This is definitely not the case case for every school or every student in a public school, but it's certainly a possibility. Another aspect of school culture at a public school that I personally love is that you'll have a lot more diversity of students. Students from different socioeconomic backgrounds, students from different cultural backgrounds. It varies, but private schools generally won't have as much diversity. All right, number 3, the big one, parents. This is quite possibly the most significant difference that I have experienced going from private school to public school. In a private school, parents are quite literally investing in their child's education, often tens of thousands of dollars per year. For example, the tuition at the private high school that I taught at was $13,720 per academic year. Over 4 years, this amounts to just over $55,000 in tuition alone. If a student were to attend K through 12, their tuition would be just shy of $100,000. And this is only the tuition. This doesn't include sports fees, lunch fees, or uniform costs, or paying for anything else that's required for your student to attend school. That's a big investment. Because of this, you'll have no shortage of parent volunteers. You'll also have a lot more parent involvement regarding grading, classroom expectation, individual assignment structure, discipline, and so on and so forth. Now, don't get me wrong. The fact that parents are involved is not a negative. It means they care about their student and how they're doing in my classroom. And I've had a lot of students whose parents don't care at all, and that's way worse. So having parents involved is a very positive thing, but it does put a little bit more pressure on you as a teacher. Public school. Parent involvement will really vary depending on the community, but I can say with a lot of confidence across the board that parents will be less inclined to comment on your teaching style if you're doing your job right. So if you send out weekly emails and keep everyone informed about what's going on, you're pretty much good to go. It's sad, but since public schools are free, parents may be less inclined to be concerned about the smaller details that go on in your classroom. With a more appropriate level of parent involvement at the public school, you will have more flexibility in your classroom, and your administration won't be as concerned with every little assignment that you're giving in your classroom. This can be both a blessing and a curse if you actually do need parent involvement in a certain situation. All right, number 4, leadership structure. This will be different from private school to public school, and it's going to vary a lot in the private school setting. So I'm just going to talk about what I've experienced and what I've seen in the private school. And if you've had something different, go ahead and let me know in the comments. In a public school, you'll generally have a pretty standard hierarchy of authority. You'll have your superintendent at the top, and then maybe a few directors of elementary, middle, and high school education, and then principals at each individual school, and then you'll have your assistant principals, and then individual teachers at the bottom. That's a structure we pretty much all understand, and that's pretty standard, and a lot of private schools will even have a very similar structure as well. However, they may call a few things by different names. Every private school that I've taught at has had a different authority chain, but I'm going to share the most common structure that I've come across. Generally, you'll have a headmaster at the top. And a headmaster is basically what it sounds like. They are in charge of the big picture ideas such as advertising and recruitment, budgetary concerns, and the more larger aspects of running a school. Below them would be the school principals, and this really depends on the school. A lot of private schools are K through 12. They have all grade levels. Some may be K through 8, depending on how long they've been around. But individual principals for each school will generally be present, such as a lower school principal and an upper school principal, but again, that can vary depending on the needs of the school. Assistant principals will be present as well, but this is often a dual position. They are not always just a principal. Sometimes they will teach several classes while also having administrative duties, and often they'll handle the discipline aspects of running a school, while the head principals are left to handle curriculum and things of that nature. Department heads are also possible, such as a fine arts director or individual curriculum leads, but I would say they are less common depending on how many teachers are present at the school. Teacher qualifications. It is generally understood that teachers need to hold certain qualifications in order to teach children in a school setting. However, this will vary depending on if you are in a private or a public school. This may be a surprise to some, but in a private school, you aren't required to have a teaching license.
Are you serious?
Generally, each teaching position does still require you to have a bachelor's degree, but in some cases that's not even required. Private schools are exactly that, private. They're not required to teach state standards, and they're not even required to have teachers who are certified to teach the subjects that they're employed in. When considering to teach in a private school, this may be an attractive aspect to you. However, teaching in a private school long term can handicap you in the future. If you're looking to transition into a public school later on, but you've never been certified to teach in your content area, or you don't have any previous public school teaching whatsoever, then a few things may happen. One, you'll have to get certified. You'll have to go through your state's Department of Education to get your certification so that you can teach in the public school system. Also, say you have 20 years of teaching experience, but you've never taught in a public school. Generally, public schools will pay you based on how many years of experience you have as a teacher. If you've taught 20 years in a private school setting and you're looking to transition into a public school, they most likely will not count any of your experience towards your salary. So you will most likely make the salary of a first-year teacher. Public school. Qualifications are very important. If you don't have a teaching license, then you generally cannot be a teacher. This may vary, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. The basic requirement for any teacher to teach in the United States is to have your bachelor's degree. A question I get a lot is, do I have to have a degree in my content area that I'm looking to teach in? And the truth is you don't. You don't need to have your bachelor's in elementary education in order to be an elementary teacher. Generally, there are state tests, and once you pass those tests, you can be certified to teach that content area regardless of what your bachelor's is in. Some states may require higher levels of certifications that they want teachers to have, such as a master's or a reading specialist credential, but often you can get those as you're working as a teacher. All right, this is the big one, salary. The salary that you're paid at a private school will vary drastically depending on the school. According to ZipRecruiter in the state of Florida, the average salaries that they were seeing for private school teaching positions were from $20,000 to $29,000 per year. Now, this is really a weak statistic in my opinion. When private schools post their jobs on these sites, they don't always disclose what the salary is. The salary they offer generally depends on the candidate and how much experience they have and all of those different details. However, based on my experience, private school salaries will generally be a lot lower across the country than public school salaries. For example, the private school that I taught at offered me a starting salary of $36,000 per year. When I graduated with my master's, there was no additional compensation. Keep in mind, this was at a very large private school of over 700 students. Teachers at the private school that I attended growing up, who had 10 years or more experience, were still being paid less than $30,000 a year. This school's enrollment was less than 300 students. In contrast, teachers at a private school that I did observations at were paid about $36,000 a year as well, but they had roughly over 2,000 students in enrollment at their school. Needless to say, private schools will often pay much less than public schools. Public school salaries will vary by state and district. The good news is you can look up exactly what a starting salary would be for you with your experience at any public school in the country. Since it's a public school, teaching salaries are public record, and you can even see how much a teacher will make based on their level of experience. A quick internet search regarding your state's salary averages for teachers will show you roughly how much you're going to make in the state that you're looking to teach in. I hope what I shared today was informative and gave some of you some information that you may not have found all in one place. Whether one is better than the other really depends on your situation and what's important to you as a teacher. I personally prefer the public school setting because I have a lot of freedom in my classroom. I have a larger diversity of students. I get paid a more livable wage, and I just enjoy the environment a lot better than when I was teaching in a private school. But it may not be the case for everyone. If you have anything to add about the private or public school experience, then please hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think, or contact me on Instagram or Twitter. I would love to open up that conversation. Thank you so much for watching my video. I have a few more videos planned this summer, so please hit that subscribe button so you know when I post something new. My name is Jace. This is Schmidt Minutes. See you soon.